Voy a hablar en castellano porque sé que hay muchos castellano hablantes en este webinar y lo voy a hacer lento porque sé que la traducción a veces es complicada. Bueno, en primer lugar, que es un honor estar hoy aquí en este evento representando la plataforma, ¿no? Que es una red con tantos miembros y tan diversos. Por lo tanto, gracias por la oportunidad. Y en esta sesión sobre los cómo, ¿no? Sobre cómo coordinarnos de alguna forma, queríamos centrarnos en qué mecanismos pueden ser útiles para fomentar el trabajo conjunto entre las relatorías, para estructurar una forma de colaboración entre sociedad civil, gobiernos locales y dichas relatorías que pueda ser fructuosa a medio plazo, y cómo reforzar el derecho a la ciudad como derecho humano, ¿no? Que cruza con muchos de los contenidos que trabajáis en las relatorías especiales que estáis hoy aquí. Y en muchas otras, claro. Y en este sentido creo que ya se han mencionado varios ejemplos y bueno, existen muchos otros mecanismos que ya están funcionando en mayor o menor medida. Entonces yo quería mencionar como tres cosas. En primer lugar, y ya se ha dicho al inicio, creo que ha sido Rash, las aportaciones de la sociedad civil y los gobiernos locales en visitas a países o a comunicaciones temáticas, pues ya es una forma, ¿no? Como de participación. Y, por ejemplo, desde la Plataforma por el Derecho a la Ciudad sí que nos parecía importante trabajar en concreto en procesos de pérdida de derechos vinculados a la financiarización de las ciudades o a su privatización, que requiere de una mirada amplia y un trabajo conjunto entre las distintas relatorías y distintos actores. Y aquí, por ejemplo, teníamos el ejemplo, trabajamos hace el año pasado o hace dos ya, entre la Relatoría por el Derecho a una Vivienda Adecuada y expertos del Grupo de Trabajo de Business y Human Rights de Naciones Unidas sobre una comunicación sobre Blackstone, ¿no? Un fondo buitre que estaba teniendo un impacto importante en varios países, en 5 países del mundo en concreto y en las ciudades, ¿no? O sea, y ahí pudimos trabajar conjuntamente. Yo creo que, bueno, seguir en esta línea puede ser interesante y como ya se están haciendo en varios informes, trabajar de forma conjunta. En segundo lugar, y creo que también lo mencionaba ahora Rodrigo, establecer espacios coordinados que tengan más continuidad, ¿no? Que ya sean como grupos de referencia sobre temas concretos, como elaborar también documentos de guía, guidelines, por ejemplo, respecto a algún tema, ¿no? En particular el derecho a la ciudad nos interesa a nosotros mucho, pero bueno, hacer como este trabajo conjunto un poco más a medio largo plazo y que sean medianamente estables. Y ya para terminar, un tema importante que en España yo creo que hemos sido un poco pioneras es la implementación de las decisiones de órganos de tratado de Naciones Unidas, como los comités, por ejemplo, y que aquí un esfuerzo conjunto entre sociedad civil, gobiernos locales y el apoyo de las relatorías en este tipo de procesos puede ser clave para que se implementen de forma correcta en los estados, por parte de poderes públicos y por parte del Poder Judicial, que muy a menudo es reacio a implementar el derecho internacional de los derechos humanos, ¿no? a nivel interno. Entonces, bueno, sería muy útil que desde la relatoría se incidiera también en este punto y sabemos que se está haciendo, por ejemplo, en casos de desahucios, pues en España ha participado la relatoría de vivienda, en temas de discapacidad, en temas de menores, pero bueno, reforzar este trabajo y también hacerlo como de forma cruzada con varias relatorías. Muchas gracias.
Muchas gracias, Irene. Sorry. I'm so sorry. I was speaking in Spanish for a little bit, but thank you so much, Irene, for your intervention. And now we are going to move forward with Maria Silvia Emanuele. She's coordinator of Latin America in Habitat International Coalition. Very dear friend. Maria Silvia, can you take the floor?
Hola, muchas gracias. Un placer estar aquí. Hola, Rodrigo. Hola a todos y todas. Agradezco mucho las intervenciones que ya los relatores han hecho porque son muy esclarecedoras. Yo quisiera empezar haciendo una pequeña broma retomando lo que decía Adriana. Mi intervención, muy legada a la que hizo también Irene antes que yo, está un poco enfocada a ver cómo hacemos los relatores bienes comunes. O sea, cómo realmente avanzamos en la posibilidad de amplificar su trabajo de alguna manera, que es tan relevante, y quizás flexibilizarlo también un poco para que realmente pueda llegar a todos los rincones posibles. En primer lugar, agradezco a Raj que ya nos ha dado la oportunidad a través de una consulta reciente de reflexionar sobre los temas principales de trabajo y también sobre todos los mecanismos existentes y, bueno, dar ideas y hacer y compartir reflexiones. Bueno, para justamente amplificar y flexibilizar un poco el trabajo de los relatores, que tienen, como sabemos, pequeños equipos, muchas reglas que seguir y también pocos recursos, creemos desde HIC que se podrían reproducir experiencias como las que ya se han dado en algunos casos en el pasado, como es la creación de un grupo asesor multiactoral. Por ejemplo, tuvimos uno bajo OurHabitat que trabajó el tema de los desalojos y desplazamientos durante muchos años. ¿Cómo poder recuperar un espacio? Ya se ha hablado de otras opciones como foros, digamos, o espacios de diálogo permanentes, pero también podría ser esta especie de grupo asesor multiactoral que puedan identificar emergencias, construir con los relatores y las relatoras estrategias, pero también eventualmente reforzar sus acciones al contar con un cierto grado de validación por parte de los mismos relatores. Se mencionaron las comunicaciones. Ustedes saben que las comunicaciones son una herramienta muy relevante, pero son un poco frustrantes para los movimientos sociales muchas veces, porque además de ser complicadas de elaborarse, y yo sé que hay relatores que han simplificado la comunicación, como la exrelatora de vivienda Leilani, y también puede ser que muchos otros piensen hacerlo o ya lo han hecho, pero las comunicaciones eran complicadas de elaborar y normalmente implicaban o implican una comunicación por parte de los afectados, una respuesta del Estado y ningún otro paso posterior, a menos que no hayan, digamos, situaciones muy excepcionales. A veces ayuda la oficina del alto comisionado en el país, pero hemos visto que no siempre ni las oficinas en los países tienen realmente una prioridad en los derechos sociales, por ejemplo, y ayudan de forma reducida. ¿Cómo acompañar, por ejemplo, estas comunicaciones y que la ida y vuelta entre la autoridad, los grupos sociales de base o las organizaciones sea más fluida? Hemos tenido casos en los cuales a partir de una comunicación algunas personas han sido amenazadas y los relatores ya no han sido avisados de esta situación, incluso solo por el tema de vivienda. Solo quiero decir porque estamos acostumbrados a conocer amenazas más por otros temas. De la misma manera, por ejemplo, misiones de observación que podrían realizar este grupo asesor, otros grupos, y que de alguna manera encuentren una validación de los relatores y de esta forma podamos realmente amplificar, decíamos, su trabajo y, por así decirlo, entre comillas, tener al relator en varios lugares al mismo tiempo. Y finalmente, algo que quizás es muy básico, pero es reforzar el peso del trabajo realizado por las relatorías a través de un mayor acercamiento a los grupos sociales o a un público más amplio. Hay grupos, hay movimientos que siguen sin conocer el gran trabajo de la relatoría, sin utilizarlo, sin pelear por el respeto, digamos, de lo que eventualmente sean recomendaciones de los relatores, pero incluso hay organizaciones y muchas en Europa, por ejemplo, que no acostumbran, otro caso es el del Observatorio Desk, pero otras que no acostumbran recurrir a los relatores. Entonces, ¿cómo acercar realmente las relatorías a la gente para que defienda mejor la gente misma después lo que la relatoría han establecido? Y por esto, bueno, se han usado ya varias herramientas, pero el utilizo de materiales populares como los que usó Raquel Rolnick en su momento para simplificar documentos de Naciones Unidas, la mayor presencia en redes, el uso de los videos o lo que decía el relator Felipe González, la posibilidad de mantener un diálogo a distancia con movimientos que no fácilmente se mueven a Ginebra o a Nueva York. Creo que podemos ser muy creativos, la pandemia nos ha obligado a hacerlo también en este sentido de los medios de comunicación alternativos y deberíamos realmente llegar a poder hacer que las relatorías sean conocidas y así como su trabajo por muchas más personas. Muchísimas gracias por la oportunidad.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. And yeah, thank you so much, Sylvia. And I would like to ask for Amanda Flety, who is the coordinator of the Social Inclusion, Participatory Democracy, and Human Rights Committee of UCLG, to take the floor. Amanda?
Thank you very much. Yes,
did I say the name right? Yeah. Did I say the name of the committee right? Because everything. Good. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Rodrigo. I know we have a long title of the committee, but it also shows all the commitments of our cities. Thank you very much for the discussion and for the presentations on the different mandates that we have been hearing on the first part and also now. Maybe starting to recall, maybe that's one of the main goal when UCLG was created, it was to make visible the voice of cities, visible especially regarding the most pressing challenges we are facing in our world, and that's led actually to the adoption and recognition of the right to the city by our constituency on this willingness to build a comprehensive and integrated vision on the social function of the city. And that was a strong commitment that we have been supporting with UCLG, and especially from the Committee on Social Inclusion, Participatory Democracy, and Human Rights. I think it's important to also recall that what can local and regional government bring to the table is concrete experience, is commitment that can support all the work we are trying to develop through the international agendas. And we have been always very careful on building both this international advocacy work in link with the concrete solutions, the concrete policies led by local governments from the local level. I would also highlight that all the work we have been doing also in the framework of the right to city and from our constituency is also the purpose to show how local government can create and can go beyond their legal competences to build a larger, wider vision of the city. And that's one of the strong points we have been defending on the right to the city. And we know also the importance of choices at the local level. And we all know that wrong choices made by local government can also generate discrimination, can also generate inequalities, can generate contamination. So, and at the opposite, good choices made by local government can generate the good experiences. And for example, I was trying to relate a little bit with the presentation we had on the first part, but remunicipalization of water, water as a common good, how to build inclusive citizenship for migrants in our cities, how to develop intersectionality in gender agenda, how to tackle spatial segregation. All these topics we have been addressing over the past years are directly and concretely linked to the mandates that you have been presenting and the priorities. So we know these choices are important at the local level, and that's why we hope to foster commitment and cooperation with you. Maybe because I don't have a lot of time, but I would just like to bring some ideas on how we can have enhance the mechanism based on the experience we had a lot with the special portal on housing, but also with the special portal on culture, and more widely on all the work developed with the OHCHR on the human rights cities, on the human rights based approach at the local level. First, I think it would be interesting to develop the contribution of the local and regional governments to your annual reports. We have been launching call of contribution, and that's something we could also explore together to gather this experience of the policies led by local governments and all these initiatives regarding the different rights we have been talking about. The second point is also to see how we can better bring the representation of local and regional governments in a UN mechanism. For example, regarding the housing, the right to adequate housing, we have been organizing side events during the Human Rights Council, co-organizing also representation of local government representative during the presentation of the special rapporteur, and all these different international discussion within the UN, where we could bring this special experience of local government committee to defend the rights at the local level. We could also, it works in both ways, so we could also foster the involvement and cooperation with the special rapporteur within our events, our reports, our mechanism. We are having a policy council on the rights of the city. It could be interesting to explore how we could also relate with you depending on the topics that we will be exploring in the policy council. And our co-presidents of the Committee on Social Inclusion also made you a concrete proposal on the first part, that was to enhance direct collaboration with our membership and to organize visits of special reporters in the cities to also nurture and feed your evaluation and different reports. And finally, I think something.
Yeah, please.
Yes, and my final point is also regarding enhancing the multi-level dialogue with national representatives. We know it's a meaningful and instrumental tool, and that's something also we could explore together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Amanda. So sorry for the strict time. I would like to call now Octavi de la Varga, who is Secretary General of Metropolis, to take the floor. Octavi?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting me to come in. I think more or less everything has been said by my colleagues. What I would like to add is as well that also listening to cities are listening, and this space is already an instrument. I mean, being here all together, trying to develop a common narrative is also important, and that's what I wanted to say. I think apart from the mechanisms, I think we should also work together to change the narrative and not only be isolated voices, but changing the narrative in some of the elements that have been discussed today, in the issues around intersectionality of policies and rights. We still are working on silos, maybe local governments, because they have the perspective, the whole perspective in relation with the citizens, and as well in relation to the city, have a more global perspective. But I think we need to work in a different approach, and I think working together and changing the narrative, that could provide us with more impact in what we're doing. As well, the debate, I think we should explore with all the different rapporteurs and the civil society organizations and local governments working together on this idea of citizenship. And sometimes instead of talking about citizenship and citizens, we should be talking about persons. And what we consider, because what we're knowledge about being a citizen and what we're not acknowledging when we're talking about being a citizen, instead of persons, people, and inhabitants. And the other thing is about, I think we should identify, as has been said, spaces for dialogue in an intersectional way. Monitoring groups, I think monitoring groups with all the different actors in terms of how all these recommendations and the global agenda is being implemented from the perspective of rights and human rights and the right to the city. And then as well, how we can incorporate, I think that's a challenge as well. And here local governments, maybe we can also work on that, is how we can incorporate the voice of those who are less structured. Because my feeling is that at the end of the day, those who are talking, those who are intervening, are the ones who are more structured, who have more power, and maybe we are missing voices. And because local governments, I think something that as well that Amanda said, we are connected as well. We're working on everyday basis with local civil society organizations, with local groups. Sometimes those who are less heard, we could also facilitate and work together to bring these other voices on the discussion. But for me, it's how we can, as I said before, how we can create and build an alliance where we can transform the narrative. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Octavi. I would like now to ask for the rapporteurs to briefly comment on, to briefly react on those comments. And we're just sorry that Pedro Rojo, he had to leave for another meeting, but we would like to thank him very much. And we are then sending him all the results of this last part of the discussion. So now I would like to invite Raj to share your reactions to the comments. 2 minutes, please.
Hi, thank you. I'll just be very brief about a couple of points. One is I welcome all the comments that were made, particularly the idea of permanent coordination, an advisory group on perhaps reviving an advisory group on evictions and displacement, which used to exist, and follow up, of course, to communication, which has been one of the major sort of reasons why I took on this, was to see how follow-ups, both with regard to communication, but also with regard to country visits, can be improved over time, and explore new ways of doing that, and the kind of networks that that are engaged with meeting today, the 3 host organizing networks are examples of ways in which, perhaps some of these follow-up and other efforts can be improved over time. But I just want to just briefly say one issue, just something very briefly about one issue that has been raised in the chat box by Nelson, particularly Nelson Saule. And that's particularly regarding the implementation of, UN decisions, mechanisms, the guidelines by rapporteurs, decisions by treaty bodies, general comments, and other part of what we consider to be human rights law and standards. And the crucial point that he raises particularly is regarding the lack of knowledge of or the inability or unwillingness to apply these standards by public powers and the judiciary. Particularly, the role of the judiciary, I believe, is central, particularly if we take the issue of evictions seriously. The reality is that in the last 20 years, the judiciary has been the driving force behind much of the eviction, increase in evictions that we have seen in country after country. And there is a dire need to engage the judiciary in more creative ways. And as rapporteurs, we have many restraints about how we can engage the judiciary directly. But I believe that we have to think creatively about this. And I remain open to any and all ideas about how we can, as rapporteurs, engage with the judiciary in more effective ways and influence the way in which decisions are taken by them. And I think that this is going to be very crucial as we also think about, changing some of the laws that underlie land governance, for example, without engaging those who are in charge of implementing these regulations and laws, so primarily the courts. I think it's going to be very difficult to make progress, because often what we find is that even when we find governments, whether at the national or local levels, that are willing to agree with our recommendations in terms of policies, they do draft these policies, and the policies are put on paper, but there is a huge gulf between what's on paper and what actually happens on the ground. In reality, there is that huge implementation or realization gap, and we need to really take that on as a central challenge. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Raj, for your inputs. And I would like to ask Victor to share with us his reactions.
I was very appreciative of all of the ideas that actually were thrown around the screen during those moments, and I've taken careful note of the ways in which these organizations are actually conceiving their strategies. My fundamental belief is that as special procedures mandate holders, one of our jobs is to make sure that we maintain transparency about the tools that we are using, so that civil society, academia, and human rights defenders can build their strategies. Let me give you an example. Some comments were made about the possibilities and limitations of communications. But one of the issues that I think is oftentimes disregarded is the possibility of orchestrating a number of communications so that they would represent a strategic investment over 2 or 3 years. Because individual communications make part of the stock upon which we report to the Human Rights Council and the General Assembly. To just give you an example, I am planning in 2023, the last year of my mandate, to do an overall assessment of the progress of United Nations in terms of deconstructing violence and discrimination. And an organization that has the outlook of actually building a stock of communications following a thematic thread will probably find their issues reflected in that overall assessment. But yes, it takes a critical mass in which the organization is able to make the strategic investment. And this is where, of course, coalitions and alliances come into play. The other point that I wanted to make very quickly is that I believe that there's organizations that are working already in the point of intersection of sexual orientation and gender identity and urban, city, and habitat concerns. I know, for example, of a network called the Rainbow Cities Network, which is constituted by cities having diversity programs already rooted in their particular programming. And I'm quite interested, of course, to explore the possibilities in which this type of constructions, the inbuilt expertise in cities that are working already with the point of view of diversity, which are not few, there's many around the world, will actually be able to construct agendas for influence, also conceiving the mandate as an instrument for change. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Victor, for your reactions. And as a gay man from São Paulo, I welcome a lot of your work regarding the city as a right for LGBTQI people. Next, Felipe, please, can you take the floor?
Thank you, Rodrigo. Well, I think that many interesting things have been said here by participants. I have been reading the chat as well. And I would like to refer to two issues that have been mentioned here. The first one is the issue of thematic reports. As Victor mentioned in his prior presentation, we receive contributions for the preparation of the thematic reports. And those contributions really can make a difference because states are all, at least on the issue of migration, states are always willing to show the good faces, the good side of their policies or some pilot projects or whatever. And it's very important for us to get the insight, the input from the civil society in this regard as well. And for me, and I know this is true for all special procedures, we do a lot of use of the thematic reports in terms that we do a continuous follow-up. They are really important tools, and we try to be very careful in selecting the topics so as to make a difference and to have an impact with each thematic report. So the report doesn't end with the presentation before the Human Rights Council and the General Assembly and the launch with the civil society or some states, but we really continue working based on the thematic report. So the interaction with the civil society regarding thematic reports is crucial, both during the preparation and at its dissemination and follow-up. And the other point is regarding visits, because it is true, as it has been mentioned here, that special procedures confront serious resources, financial resources constraints. But at the same time, we can do unofficial visits at the invitation, for instance, from cities, from the civil society, In fact, I myself have had the opportunity to go to cities invited by mayors or by local organizations to a congress of the city regarding the human rights of migrants, for instance. I have been at several ones. So I think that's an important avenue as well. Of course, from an unofficial visit, you cannot produce a report, but it gives you more flexibility. You don't need the invitation from the state, and it can produce an impact, and also can enhance the links between the special procedures and the civil society. Thank you very much.